Risk of Rain 2 has a total of 87 unique enemies, ranging all the way from a small beetle to Mithrix, the final boss of the game. But which one is the strongest? Now, if you asked me, I'd tell you it's the Clay Dunestrider. I really suck at fighting Clay Dunestriders. But if you look at my profile stats, I have died the most to Mithrix in my 1700 hours. And what about the newer enemies? The newest DLC, Alloyed Collective, brought with it Soulless Wing, Soulless Heart, and worst of all, the Soulless Distributor. But how do we know for sure which enemy is the strongest in the game? A 1v1 single elimination tournament between every enemy. I have taken every monster in the game that can reasonably fight, sorry Newt, and placed them into 3 tournament groups. First we have the Baby Cup, sporting legends like the Lesser Wisp and the Jellyfish. One step above that is our John Smith Cup, with our most average enemies like the Beetle Guard and the Stone Golem. And finally we have our Daddy's Cup with bosses such as Mithrix, False Sun, and Voidling. Now, since we don't have perfect numbers for these tournaments, some monsters are getting a free win. But to make sure I had no bias, all the matchups have been completely randomized. And no better place to start than the first matchup of the Baby Cup, the Geep versus the Jellyfish. So round 1 has some balance issues. That's gonna happen with randomized matches, so I'll speed run through the rest. The Alloy Vulture made quick work of the Severed Breaker, the Blind Pest bullied the Larva, the Soulless Prospector really bullied the Hermit Crab, like I feel like I need to tell a trusted adult what I saw. The Child nuked the Blind Vermin, and we ended round 1 with the best possible roll of a match, the Lemurian versus the Beetle, which was also hard to watch as a Beetle fan. Now, round 2 sees some new faces that got a bye in round 1, including the Lesser Wisp, the Imp, the Gip, and a few soulless enemies. Now, some of these matches were also quick, like the Imp obliterating the Soulless Mine, the Alloy Vulture taking out the Soulless Extractor, and the Child nuking the Gip. But there were some interesting matchups too. The Severed Probe and Soulless Prospector went back and forth trading blow after blow for a while, until finally the Severed Probe dealt the final blow. The Alpha Construct and the Soulless Distributor was odd because the Distributor had no interest in attacking the Construct at all, and neither did the Mines. And so what looked like an easy win turned into the Alpha Construct attacking a mine that was too close and killing itself. The Lemurian and Severed Scorcher had a pretty intense battle that went from range to melee, ultimately ending in the Lemurian's demise. The Blind Pest and the Soulless Scorcher had an epic aerial battle, but the Scorcher told me beforehand that it would only use fire if it landed a tar hit, which it never did. And finally, the Geep versus the Lesser Wisp. This started out just like you'd expect, the Wisp straight up violating the Geep with no remorse. But eventually the Wisp started to fake melee attacks to bait the Geep into spiking for no reason. This match took a long time. Like a long time. And just when I thought it was finally over, the Geep split into 2 Gips. Guys, I have cats I need to feed, please let me go! But all of a sudden, the Wisp got a little too cocky and got spiked by the Gip, dealing 9 damage. And for reference, a Wisp only has 15 health. One more of those, and it was over. So the Wisp returned to the original strategy. But after a few moments, greed struck once again, and the Wisp was sent flying into the wall, moving the Geep forward to round 3. Now in round 3, we only have 8 enemies left, so every match matters to take the crown of the Baby Cup. We start off with the Imp versus the Geep. The Imp tries its absolute best to teleport at the perfect times to avoid the spike, but before even reaching the Gips, the Imp falls to those spikes. Next, through a very high damage ranged battle, the Alloy Vulture takes on the Blind Pest, and the Blind Pest simply didn't have the health pool to keep up. Then the Severed Probe versus the Soulless Distributor. And the Distributor actually seen here attacking. Don't know if that's just a species thing with constructs, but if it is, I'll bring it up with the League because alloy bigotry is not tolerated here. But regardless, the Distributor came to play and dealt with the Probe easily. Next up, the Child takes on the Severed Scorcher. And the Child's strategy of throwing a nuke and running away like a child does seem to be working, as the Scorcher simply cannot make contact and the Child gets away. We now arrive at our semi-final matchups, where we first see the Geep take on the Alloy Vulture. The Alloy Vulture said it wanted to win over the GUP fans in this tournament, so it promised to stay on the ground for this matchup to make it more even. And it was certainly that. The Vulture was taking hit after hit, but eventually did bring it to a 2v1 with Gips. After taking out the first Gip, it was all but settled until the second Gip saves the day and wins it for Father Geep. And not by much either. This Gip only had 50% of its health remaining. Talk about a clutch up to send Geep to the finals. In the other matchup, we see the Child versus the Soulless Distributor. Yuck to both of these. And luckily this was a pretty quick matchup, all things considered, with the Soulless Distributor sending out 2 mines and one-shotting the Child, claiming its stake in the final matchup. And so the Baby Cup all comes down to the Geep versus the Soulless Distributor. The Soulless Distributor is attacking here, which is good, otherwise the tournament may fail. Mines are coming out everywhere, but the Geep is putting in some work, and that is not good news for Geep fans. Already 2 Geeps with minimal damage done to the Distributor. Look at these damage numbers, ladies and gentlemen. These are not even close. Triple digits from the Mines, double digits from the Geep and the Gips. I think this one is as well as over when these mines pop, and it is the Soulless Distributor, your champion of the Baby Cup, further proving that dying to these is not a skill issue. You're welcome. Now we move to the John Smith Cup. Sorry, John Smiths, you just have the most average name. But this is where the monsters start to get stronger, starting with our first match, the Void Infestor versus the Stone Golem. Now the Void Infestor is a weird case because all it needs to do is infest an enemy to win, which it does to take the victory over the Stone Golem. The Mini Mushroom and the Clay Apothecary had a very intense battle next. The Mushroom ran to heal a few times, forcing the Apothecary to walk a far distance to catch up. The Apothecary also stood in the Mushroom's pool for quite some time, but eventually the Clay Apothecary did just enough to get the kill. And by a very fine margin, might I say, the Apothecary was on its last legs. The Lunar Golem and the Void Jailer had an intense bout, both boasting big damage numbers at close range. But it certainly looks like the Void Jailer is a force to be reckoned with due to that intense shotgun blast. My personal favorite, Gup, took on the Bighorn Bison in a straight-up fistfight, each dealing 36 damage per hit. The Bison took a bad fall during the mid-game, and the Gup followed suit with an idea. An idea to simply shove the Bison off the stage and take the win. Goodbye, Bison! The Lunar Exploder was simply too much to handle for the Soulless Invalidator with those consistent bullets and no need for items. The Soulless Transporter and Parent was a matchup. The Parent was chasing the Transporter around, trying really hard to hit it, while the Transporter took a more pacifist approach. And to be honest, I got bored and ended the match myself. And finally, in a battle of fire, the Scorchworm was no match for the firepower of the Elder Lemurian. In round 2, once again, we see some new faces, like the Halcyonite and the scary Lunar Wisp, which is up first against the Void Infestor. Now this was an odd one because no one could really hit each other. And if you didn't know, Infestors only survive on a timer. And that timer, unfortunately, ran out. The Halcyonite versus the Void Reaver was long and boring, with the Void Reaver eventually getting chased off the map and dying. And I thought the Halcyonite had died first in the explosion on the way down, but turns out it just teleported back to the land and won. Next up was a match I was so excited to see: two brothers in the Clay Apothecary and Clay Templar. The Templar came out swinging immediately, and it seemed pretty even between the two of them. Templar damaging hard from range, and Apothecary putting in work up close. As the Templar was playing to get space, it used the map given and knocked the Apothecary right off. Unfortunately for all you Beetleguard fans, its opponent was the Void Jailer, and holy, this was not even close, as the Void Jailer moves on easily. Up next was the Void Barnacle versus the Gup. Now, I am a Gup believer, so much so that it's the logo of the channel and the literal name of my orange cat. And this took genuinely like 10 minutes, and after the first 5 minutes, I learned something that ruined my day. The Void Barnacle regenerates health, and it does so faster than a Gup can deal damage, and faster than 2 Geeps can deal damage, and faster than 4 Geeps. Guys, the Barnacle won. I don't want to talk about it. Let's move on already. The Brass Contraption and Lunar Exploder had a very close match, with the Brass Contraption putting in inconsistent high damage shots, while the Exploder dealt consistent small damage. And consistency pays off, because by a very fine margin, the Exploder moves on. Greater Wisp and Parent was one-sided the whole way. The Greater Wisp was much smarter than its lesser counterpart and kept its distance and got the job done. Elder Lemurian vs. the Soulless Probe was pretty one-sided as well, ending with a beautiful multi-fireball hit combo from the Elder Lemurian. Now once again, we are left with only 8 enemies, so only the best of the best can move on. This round started with Halcyonite versus Lunar Wisp, and it was pretty back and forth until the Wisp got launched up above the detection height and got stuck. So I did some slight, harmless coaxing, and the Wisp was abruptly destroyed. The Void Jailer and Clay Templar feels like it would have been close, but even just looking at the damage numbers, I knew from the start that Templar was cooked. The Lunar Exploder versus the Void Barnacle was not a matchup I thought I'd see in the top 8, but here we are, and through another display of very consistent damage, the Exploder is able to get the job done easily and knock out the Barnacle. And finally, the Elder Lemurian expectedly destroyed the Greater Wisp in seconds. Our final 4 is set, and what a weird bunch it is. Our first semi-final matchup consisted of the Halcyonite staying way too close to the Void Jailer and once again allowing the Void Jailer to rip through another opponent to grab the first championship spot. Our second semi-final was honestly the Elder Lemurian just deleting the Lunar Exploder from the game and then stunting on it super hard by just standing in the death puddle the whole time and living. And now our final championship matchup, 2 scary mid-tier enemies to see in any run. Both enemies fought hard and didn't miss any shots, but it was over quite quickly. The burn damage from that Elder Lemurian was simply not enough against that beast of a Void shotgun. The Void Jailer takes home the John Smith Cup trophy with about 75% of its health still to spare, proving it to be the scariest mid-tier enemy to find in a run. Now the moment you've all been waiting for. The Daddy's Cup hosts the 25 most powerful monsters in the game to see who can take it all home as the most powerful enemy in all of Risk of Rain 2. Put your votes in the comments below as we head into the first matchup, the Stone Titan versus the Wandering Vagrant. Now, I'll be honest, this feels like I need an 18+ rating for what the Vagrant was doing for this 11-minute recording. The Titan never really used its laser because the Vagrant closed the gap so quickly, and if you are too close to a Titan, they don't laser. Eventually, after a very, very long time, the Titan whittled the Vagrant down below 25% health, allowing for it to start exploding, and that was enough to finish the job and defeat the Stone Titan. Aurelionite took on Voidling next. Now I should mention, I'm not using the version of Voidling that has the Black Hole ability. That would be broken, and no one wants to see that. But this battle was pretty much a staring contest with really high damage, ultimately ending in Voidling pulling out the giant laser of doom and rinsing Aurelionite with it. Up next we had the battle of two DLC bosses with Soulless Wing versus False Sun. This was also a staring contest that actually came down to the wire. There was no strategy involved at all, but in the end the Soulless Wing's health pool was simply too much and False Sun fell. But not before getting Soulless Wing pretty close to death itself. We finally got to see Mithrix in action against the new Soulless Amalgamator. This was one of the more interesting battles so far just due to the range of attacks both these guys had. The Amalgamator had fire and purple electricity attacks as well as the orange blast radius attack, while Mithrix had his usual Phase 1 loadout with hammer swings, slams, and his jump. I wish I could have used Phase 3 Mithrix, but unfortunately I'm unable to spawn that given my current mods. And maybe that was the difference maker because the ability to be in the air and avoid the jump shockwaves allowed the Soulless Amalgamator to take down the big man himself in the very first round. Next up, the Scavenger took on the Soulless Control unit. This was the best match of the entire tournament so far. Scavengers are scary because they can pick up items. So if you don't kill them fast enough, they can outscale any damage really quickly. However, this Scavenger was focused on the Soulless Probes, meaning the control unit was free to do as much damage as it liked. And after a short time, the Scavenger died, and immediately came back due to having a Dio's best friend as one of its items. Now every time I spawn a Scavenger, it spawns with a completely different set of base items, and this Dio's was massive, because it allowed for the Scavenger to start scavenging. It had some huge pickups with its second life, such as 5 tri-tip daggers to bleed. Then it picked up the item of the year with 5 repulsion armor plates, lowering damage from all sources to literally 1. So every single hit from the probes was dealing 9 damage, now that was 1 damage. Then it grabbed 5 Soldier's Syringes for much higher attack speed, and finally the nail in the coffin, 5 Delicate Watches to double its damage. A short time later, the Scavenger pulled out the victory against all odds, and might I say without some Warped Echo shielding, this could have gone the other way quite easily. The absolutely terrifying Z Construct took on the new Alloy Hunter in a fast-paced laser show to see who had more raw damage output. And I'm gonna be so honest, I thought this could go either way until the Alloy Hunter died and I checked the Z's health. Jesus Christ, it might go all the way. The Overloading Worm then took on Whip Whip the Wild, whose loadout consists of extremely high damage, including Focus Crystal, ATG Missile, Brilliant Behemoth, and Shaped Glass. This was close the whole way, and Whip Whip went to grab its first item and nabbed 5 infusions that did absolutely nothing, only to be followed up with 5 Gore's Tomes that would also do nothing. And those poor pickups were the difference as Whip Whip goes down after almost finishing off the Overloading Worm. Up next we saw the Grove Tender versus the Alloy Worship unit in a very high-powered matchup. And the Grove Tender came to play with that first set of chains, knocking the Worship unit below half health, immediately triggering the ground pulse. But the next chain attack was not so well aimed, and the probes with their consistent damage were simply used as distractions while the Worship unit was able to finish the job and move on. Then in a battle of fire, we saw the Magma Worm versus the Grandparent. Now the Grandparent has a chance to win the entire thing with how intense that sun attack is, but the Magma Worm is playing very smart and keeping itself under the map to never get burned much by that sun, ending in the Magma Worm actually devastating the Grandparent in a blowout. For the last time today, we see some new faces in the second round, such as the Void Devastator, the Clay Dune Strider, and a couple more Twisted Scavengers. Our first match of the second round was the Wandering Vagrant versus the Void Devastator. And it started out very boring, with the Vagrant barely attacking, and the Devastator missing literally every shot. And nothing changed later on other than the Devastator's Plasma Shrimp attacks came out, and thank God those can't miss. Unfortunately, they deal a whopping 3 damage each, so eventually, the Devastator got the Vagrant down to 25% health, and once again, that explosion proved too much, and the Vagrant moved on. Up next was surprisingly the most difficult matchup to make happen between Voidling and Soulless Wing. Because Soulless Wing wanted to just sit around and do nothing. I swapped their teams, I swapped maps, I swapped the order of spawning, I even tried the test stage, and literally the only way I could get them to fight was to go into Soulless Wing's arena and stand behind Voidling while Soulless Wing attacked me. I don't know what you want from me, we work on a very low budget and Soulless Wing won, okay? The Soulless Amalgamator then took on Kip the Gentle with a slew of healing items like Medkit, Monster Tooth, Rejuvenation Rack, and Corpse Bloom. And not once did Kip fall below 100% health while demolishing the Amalgamator. The Scavenger was then able to bully the Imp Overlord with what seemed like average items, showing off just how strong these Scavenger enemies are, only taking about a quarter of its health. Keeping with the Scavenger theme, Gura the Lucky, armed with a 57-leaf clover, tri-tip daggers, soldier's syringes, visions of heresy, and shattering justice, took on the one, the only, two-time back-to-back monster tournament champion, the Z Construct. Every year this construct comes in and beats everything in its path, but it's never seen a Twisted Scavenger quite like this. And like it was just another day in the office, Gura is looking to make the upset, breaking out the Z Construct's shield early. It's now only a matter of time until this is over, as Gura hasn't taken enough damage to even begin looting items. And there you have it. 2026 marks a year a new winner of the Monster Tournament is to be crowned, and it just might be Gura. Our final Twisted Scavenger has yet to go, and it takes on the Overloading Worm. Twip the Devotee is armed with Crowbar, Gasoline, and Glowing Meteorite. And this is a match that we've seen before in past tournaments. Go check them out if you haven't, I make them once a year, so subscribe. And I won't spoil how those matchups went, but this time it goes to the Worm, as it's able to stay out of the way of most of Twip's attacks. The Alloy Worship unit then took on the Beetle Queen. And what happens when you pin an enemy that can fly against an enemy that actually can't move at all? The flying enemy wins. I mean, Alloy Worship unit got to work. The last match of the round was the Clay Dunestrider and the Magma Worm, which was a battle till the end. The worms are fun to watch because they truly do not stop at all, and they're also smart with how much they hide under the map. And after a long fight with tons of damage from each side, the Dunestrider just got low enough to use its Siphon attack, and that was the final bit of damage it needed to take down the Magma Worm and move forward. Our top 8 is a very unique bunch. Only one enemy from Alloyed Collective, 2 Twisted Scavengers, and somehow the Wandering Vagrant is still here, and in our first match against the Soulless Wing, and oh my god, the Soulless Wing won't attack the Vagrant. Back to the dome we go. Alright guys, this is all I got, and it wasn't even close. Take one look at my screen and tell me the Vagrant deserves to be here. It doesn't, and it lost, and that's fine because I tested the next round and Soulless Wing actually attacks. Yay! Next round is the Scavenger versus a Twisted Scavenger in Kip the Gentle. The Scavenger is a huge underdog, and it started to put up an interesting fight after picking up 5 medkits and 5 monster teeth. But it wasn't enough healing to keep up with the insane staying power of Kip the Gentle. The Overloading Worm now taking on Gura the Lucky, and it looked really close, but spoilers, one of these guys is almost full health at the end. The worm stuck Gura in a corner, which helped with the slime balls, but when that Scavenger went down, I looked at the Overloading Worm's health. Wow. Just wow. Our last quarterfinal begins with the Clay Dunestrider against the Alloy Worship unit. All signs would point to the Worship unit winning with its allies and being able to avoid the barrels on the floor, but I did wonder that with 4 enemies to siphon off of, if the Dunestrider could out-heal. I was wrong, and it was not close. Worship unit moves to the semis. Our semifinals have 4 truly strong enemies that are all deserving of the top spot. I have my vote, but is your winner still in? Our first match is the Soulless Wing vs Kip the Gentle. Maybe the 2 strongest left in the tournament. But finally, the Soulless Wing will attack and we can watch it play out. Okay, I wrote that part before I had them fight. Guys, please go like this video. This fight, I kid you not, took 41 minutes. Here is the whole fight in 10 seconds for you. Oh yeah, and by the end of it, Kip Kip had 100% of its health. Not a single scratch on the lad. It's gonna be tough to outdamage that. But we have the other semi-final waiting to face Kip Kip with the Overloading Worm versus the Alloy Worship Unit. Now this fight really had two phases. The first phase was quick, the worm doing big damage to the Worship Unit before pulling off this sick jump into the sky, which was maybe the most majestic thing I've ever seen. Then the Worship Unit went down, but 3 probes were left, and they count as part of the Worship Unit and have to die before the worm can be declared the winner. After a very, very long time, only 1 probe remained, and the worm once again had the most majestic jump to land the final blow, claiming its spot in the championship. So it all comes down to this. Kip Kip the Gentle and its 4 beetle guards and insane healing versus the sneaky consistent damage and high health pool of the Overloading Worm. The fight begins and immediately the worm starts hammering away at Kip Kip. The beetle guard's damage is pretty much a non-factor. What Kip Kip is hoping for is for them to work to draw aggro from the Overloading Worm. With the sheer amount of healing Kip Kip is capable of, the worm needs near constant damage to win. But getting distracted by beetle guards will almost certainly cost the match, and that seems to be the main issue so far. Look at those healing numbers from Kip Kip. I don't know how the worm is supposed to out-damage that one. It might just be another year for the silver medal for the Overloading Worm. Coming up short 3 years in a row to a new opponent this year has to be frustrating, but you have to focus on the main threat. The Overloading Worm on its last legs while Kip Kip has never looked better, and there it goes, Kip Kip and the Beetle Guards come out on top at full health nonetheless. Kip Kip now sits on the throne as the current strongest enemy in all of Risk of Rain 2, dethroning our 2-time champ, the Z Construct. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know ideas for what you want to see in the next iteration of this yearly series, and I will try to add as much as I can. But for now, thank you all so much for watching and liking the video, and I will see you next time.